I still remember the morning everything changed. It was quiet in the house, the kind of quiet that feels too heavy for a normal day. The sun was barely up, and there was a soft gray light coming through the curtains. I was sitting at the kitchen table, holding my cup of tea between my hands, waiting for something, though I did not know what. For a long time, I believed that silence meant peace, but that day, silence felt like a warning. I did not understand it then, but my family had already decided something without me, something big, something that would shake the ground under my feet. They had made their choice long before they gathered the courage to tell me. And when they finally spoke, it was not courage. It was fear. Fear of hurting me. Fear of seeing me break. Fear of saying words that could never be taken back. People think painful moments arrive with loudness, shouting, arguments, doors slamming. But the greatest pain I have ever felt came delivered in a soft voice, at a kitchen table, on a quiet morning while the world outside still slept. That morning, my daughter-in-law came into the kitchen first. She moved quietly, as if she did not want to disturb me. She smiled, but it was not a smile that reached her eyes. "Good morning," she said softly. I nodded and tried to smile back. Something in my chest felt tight, but I ignored it. A moment later, my son came in. He looked tired, as if he had been awake half the night. He kissed the top of my head the way he used to when he was younger, and I felt something inside me twist. Then came the part I will remember for the rest of my life. My son sat across from me, folded his hands, and kept staring at them instead of at me. "Dad, we need to talk to you," he whispered. Those words, I think every parent knows the feeling that rises when they hear them. It's like the air in the room changes temperature. I sat up a little straighter. My tea felt too warm suddenly. He took a deep breath. She reached for his hand. They both looked like people preparing to deliver bad news at a hospital. And in that moment, I knew. Or at least, I knew something was wrong. I just did not know what kind of wrong it would be. My daughter-in-law looked at me carefully, as if she was studying every expression on my face. "Please listen to everything before you react," she said calmly. I felt the first sting of fear. She only said that when she thought I wouldn't agree with something. But I nodded. I wanted to be patient. I wanted to be fair. My son swallowed, his voice trembling slightly. "Dad, we found something. About your health." My heart dropped. It felt like it hit the kitchen floor. "My health?" I whispered. "Yes," he said. "But it's not what you think. You're not sick. Nothing is physically wrong with you." He paused. "It's something else." My mind raced. If it wasn't illness, then what could it be? He looked at me again, and for a second I saw the little boy he used to be, the one who used to run to me for safety. But today, he wasn't running to me. He was afraid for me. "Dad, we found documents while sorting your old papers." He took a shaky breath. "And they show something you didn't know. Something about our family." My hand tightened around my cup. "What kind of documents?" I asked quietly. He hesitated, and then he said the words that opened a door I never knew existed. "Dad, your real name isn't the one you've used your whole life." The room went silent. Not a soft silence, but a sharp, cold one that seemed to freeze everything in place. For a long moment, I didn't speak. I didn't breathe. I didn't blink. Not who I think I am. What does that even mean? What kind of statement is that? Was he joking? Was this some strange misunderstanding? I felt my chest tighten, like someone was pulling a string slowly around my heart. My daughter-in-law moved her chair closer. "She didn't want to keep this from you," she said softly, but we needed time to understand it ourselves. I stared at both of them, waiting for an explanation that refused to come. Then my son whispered, "Dad, your real name isn't the one you've used your whole life." My teacup trembled in my hands. My real name? What does that mean? Who decides something like that? My voice cracked. What are you talking about?" He stood up, walked to a drawer, and pulled out a small folder, the kind used for official documents. As soon as he placed it on the table, I felt the air thicken. I knew that whatever was inside would change everything. He pushed it toward me gently. "Please, read these." But my hands were shaking, so my daughter-in-law opened the folder for me. There were 3 papers, old, yellowed, creased from years of being hidden. I recognized none of them. The first one was a birth certificate, but not mine. At least, not with the name I had carried for almost 70 years. The name printed there felt foreign, distant, like it belonged to someone else entirely. My eyes blurred. "My name, this isn't—" My son nodded slowly. "It is. This is your original birth record." I shook my head. No, this must be a mistake." My daughter-in-law placed a hand on my arm. "We checked everything. It's real." I felt something inside me crumble, quietly, without warning. All these years, I had believed I knew myself. I had believed my parents told me the truth. I had believed my life had a proper beginning, a middle, and a story that made sense. But in one moment, the story I knew became a door that led to a dark room I never entered. My voice was barely a whisper. "So, who am I?" My son's eyes filled with tears. "That's what we're trying to figure out, but we didn't want you to go through this alone." I pressed my shaking hands against my forehead. This wasn't illness. This wasn't a mistake. This was something deeper, something hidden, something my family had kept from me for decades. But why? Why would they hide something like this? Who was protecting me, and from what? My breath was uneven. I suddenly felt like a stranger in my own kitchen, sitting in a house filled with memories that no longer belonged to the man I thought I was. My daughter-in-law's voice softened. "Your parents might not have been your real parents." The words echoed in my chest, slow, heavy, painful. Not my real parents? The room began to blur. "Dad," my son said gently, "we're here with you. We'll uncover the truth together." But all I could hear, over and over, was a single question. If my family hid this from me, what else did they hide? I closed my eyes, and the memories of my childhood flickered behind them. My mother's smile, my father's steady hands, the stories they told me before bedtime. Were those stories even mine? I felt the first tears slide down my cheek. My daughter-in-law reached out again. "It's going to be okay," she whispered. But the truth was, I didn't know if it ever would be. Because that morning, for the first time in my life, I felt something I had never felt before. I felt lost, completely lost. I do not remember how long we sat there in that quiet kitchen. Maybe a few minutes, maybe much longer. When your entire life suddenly shifts beneath you, time stops being something you can measure. My son stayed sitting across from me, his hands still clasped tightly together. My daughter-in-law stayed beside me, as if afraid I might crumble right there on the kitchen floor. I appreciated their presence, but at the same time, I felt strangely distant from them, like there was a window between us, and I was watching them from the other side. "I know this is hard," my son said gently. I nodded, though I did not truly understand what this was yet. I only knew that something precious, something I had never questioned, had been cracked open. I looked down on the birth certificate again. The paper was worn, the ink faded, but the name was clear. A name I had never heard in my life. "Where did you find these?" I asked quietly. My son exchanged a glance with his wife before answering. "In the old trunk in the storeroom, behind the blankets. It was hidden under a loose board." I closed my eyes for a moment. That trunk. It had belonged to my mother. She always kept it locked, and for years after she passed away, I never opened it. I kept it as it was, untouched, because it felt like the last piece of her I still had. When I finally opened it years later, I found old clothes, photographs, and things that made sense. Nothing unusual, but I never noticed the loose board beneath the fabric lining. My daughter-in-law continued softly, "We weren't trying to dig into anything. We were cleaning because the storeroom was getting dusty. When the lining moved, the paper slipped out." I tried to swallow, but my throat tightened painfully. "So, you've known for how long?" 3 weeks. My son admitted. His voice sounded like guilt. "We weren't sure how to tell you." 3 weeks. 3 weeks of knowing something about me that I did not know. 3 weeks of carrying this secret. 3 weeks of deciding the best way to break me gently. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. The light from the window cast a soft glow, but the room still felt heavy. "What else is there?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. My son opened the folder again and took out the second document. This is an adoption record." I felt the world go silent again. Adoption. The word felt foreign, sharp, cold, like it did not belong in the same sentence as my life. I shook my head instinctively. No, that can't be." But he slid the paper toward me anyway. My mother's name wasn't there. My father's name wasn't there. Instead, there were names I had never seen. And my own. Or rather, the child that was supposed to be me. My daughter-in-law spoke softly. "It says you were adopted at 2 years old." 2 years old. Too young to remember anything, too young to understand anything, old enough to have been someone else before I became me. I stared at the paper until the words blurred. My parents, the people I loved, the people who raised me, why didn't they tell me? My chest hurt. Not the physical kind of pain, but a deeper, heavier ache that felt like betrayal mixed with confusion. I had spent my whole life honoring them, remembering their sacrifices, teaching my son about their kindness. I thought I knew their love completely. But now, I wondered, did they love me? Or did they hide me? My son's voice broke through my thoughts. "Dad, are you okay?" I nodded slowly. "I don't know. I really don't know." I wasn't angry at them. I was hurt. And that hurt felt like a quiet storm gathering inside me. After a long silence, I finally asked, "What about the third paper?" He hesitated again. That hesitation scared me more than anything. My daughter-in-law brought out the last document. A letter. An old letter, written in handwriting I didn't recognize. She placed it gently in my hands. "We think this was written by your biological mother." I stared at the letter without opening it. My biological mother. Someone I had never imagined existed. I felt my heart beating in my ears. My son added softly, "We didn't read it. We thought you should be the first." I appreciated that. Maybe more than they knew. I brushed my fingers over the folded paper. The texture was rough, and the edges were frayed. Whoever wrote this had written it a long time ago, long before I ever knew there was a letter waiting for me. Looking at it made me feel something I could not explain. Fear, curiosity, a strange sense of longing. But I couldn't open it. Not yet. My mind wasn't ready. "I need time," I whispered. "Of course," my daughter-in-law said quickly. My son reached across the table and gently touched my hand. "We're not going anywhere. Take all the time you need." I nodded. But the truth was, I felt like I needed more than time. I needed answers. I needed clarity. I needed to understand the people who raised me. I needed to understand why this letter had been hidden. And a small part of me, one I wasn't ready to admit, needed to know the woman that wrote this letter. The woman connected to me by blood. The woman who lived somewhere in the past of my life, unseen and unknown. For the rest of that morning, we didn't talk much. They sat with me until I told them I needed a moment alone. They stepped out quietly, leaving the documents on the table. As soon as they left, the house felt different. Not like home, more like a place filled with shadows of memories that weren't fully mine anymore. I looked around the kitchen, at the counters, the old wooden cupboards, the small clock above the stove. For decades, I had lived here believing these walls held the story of my life. Now they felt like walls of a home belonging to a stranger. I picked up the adoption paper again and read it slowly. The dates matched my birth year. The signatures were official. There was no room for doubt. I tried to picture my parents, my adoptive parents, signing these papers. How must they have felt? Were they happy to take me in? Were they scared? Did they promise to protect me? Did they worry I would one day find out? And then I wondered, why didn't they never tell me? Maybe they thought it would protect me. Maybe they were afraid of losing me. Maybe they believed love was stronger than truth. I wanted to be angry, but instead I felt something else. A quiet kind of grief. Not for myself, but for them. They must have carried this secret their whole lives. Every time they looked at me, every time they held me, every time they told me they loved me. Did they wonder if I would still love them if I knew? That thought broke me a little. I sat there for a long time, the letter still unopened in my hand. I kept telling myself I wasn't ready, but I knew the truth. I was afraid. Afraid of what the letter might reveal. Afraid that it might change everything I believed about myself. Afraid that it might explain too much, or not enough. I placed the letter gently back on the table. Not yet. Not today. Instead, I stood up and walked slowly to the living room. My legs felt weak. My chest was heavy. I sat on the sofa and stared at the wall without seeing anything. Memories of my childhood floated into my mind. My mother brushing my hair, my father teaching me to tie my shoes, the nights they tucked me in, the warmth of their hugs, the stories they told about when you were little. Were those lies, or were those memories real in their own way? I pressed my hand to my chest. I still love them, I whispered to myself. I always will. But now there were new people in my story, people I didn't know, people whose silence shaped my life before I could speak a single word. I wasn't sure how to feel about them yet. As the minutes passed, the house stayed quiet. I could hear faint sounds from the other rooms, my son moving things around, my daughter-in-law closing drawers softly, but they didn't come in. They gave me space. After a long time, I stood and walked back into the kitchen. The documents were still there, waiting for me like unread chapters of a book I wasn't sure I wanted to finish. I gently touched the letter again. Not yet. But soon. I exhaled deeply and whispered to the empty room. I will find the truth, even if it hurts. And that was the moment, quiet, small, almost unnoticeable, when my life began to change, not by force, but by choice. The rest of that day moved slowly, like walking through water. Every step, every breath, every sound in the house felt heavier than it should have. I tried to focus on simple things, washing my cup, folding a dish towel, opening the window to let in fresh air. But nothing felt normal anymore. It was as if the world outside continued as usual, while inside me, something had quietly cracked. Later in the afternoon, my son came into the living room. He walked carefully, like someone approaching a wounded animal. "Dad, we made lunch," he said gently. "It's on the table whenever you feel ready." I looked up at him and nodded. "Thank you." He lingered for a moment, as if waiting to see whether I would say more. When I didn't, he gave a small, worried smile and walked back to the kitchen. I sat there for a while longer. Eventually, I stood up and went to the dining table where my daughter-in-law had set out warm food. The smell should have comforted me, but I barely tasted anything. She sat down across from me, folding her hands. "If you want us to stop talking about it for a while, we can. We don't want to overwhelm you." I took a slow breath. "It's not that," I said. "I just don't know what to do yet." "That's okay," she whispered. "You don't have to." Her kindness made something ache inside me. She had always treated me with respect, with patience. She wasn't pushing, she wasn't judging. She was giving me the space I didn't know how to ask for. After lunch, I stepped outside into the backyard. The air was cool and the sky was cloudy. The wind rustled the leaves in the mango tree my father had planted decades ago. I stared at that tree for a long time. That tree was part of my childhood. I remembered sitting beneath it during summer holidays, eating fruit straight from its branches. I remembered my father pruning it, watering it, talking to it as if it could listen. And now, I wondered who planted the tree in me. Who gave me life? Where did I come from? Whose eyes did I inherit? Whose voice did I carry? The questions swirled in my mind like dust in old sunlight. After a long moment, I whispered to myself, if I wasn't their blood, was I still their son? But before the sadness could settle too deeply, I found the answer inside me, quiet and steady like a heartbeat. Yes, of course. Love made me their son. Not paperwork, not DNA, not even truth. As I stood there, staring up at the tree, I thought about how much they gave me. And yet the fact that they kept something so important from me, something that touched the core of who I was, it still hurt. Not because they lied, but because they never trusted me enough to handle the truth. I wiped my face with my sleeve. I hadn't realized I was crying. After a while, my son stepped out and stood beside me. "Beautiful tree," he said softly. "It is." I agreed. He hesitated before speaking again. "Dad, you don't have to search for answers if you don't want to. We won't force anything." I looked at him carefully. "And if I do want answers?" He nodded. "Then we'll help you. Every step." I stared out at the tree again. "I don't know what I want," I admitted, "but I want to understand why all of this happened. I want to understand my parents. I owe them that much." He placed a hand on my back. "We'll go as slowly as you need." As he walked back into the house, I stayed outside a little longer, breathing deeply, trying to let the air settle my thoughts. But peace did not come. Not yet. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the soft hum of the fan. The house felt too quiet, the kind of quiet that made your mind louder. I kept thinking of that letter on the kitchen table. It felt like a doorway waiting to be opened. Around midnight, I finally got up. The house was dark, except for the faint glow from the street lamp outside. I walked slowly to the kitchen, the floorboards creaking softly beneath my feet. The letter was still there. I sat down, turned on the small light above the stove, and stared at the folded paper once more. My hands trembled slightly as I picked it up. For a moment, I held my breath. Then, I opened it. The handwriting was careful, almost elegant. It looked like someone who took their time forming each letter, as if every word mattered. The letter began simply, "My child." I felt my chest tighten. I continued reading, each line heavier than the one before it. If you are reading this, it means you have grown up. It means the people who took you in have kept you safe. It means you lived the life I wanted for you. I blinked rapidly, trying to clear my vision. Who was she? What had she been through? Why did she give me away? The letter went on. I did not give you up because I did not love you. I gave you up because I loved you more than I loved myself. My chest closed. I could barely breathe. Your father died before you turned 1. I could not feed you. I could not protect you. I could barely keep myself alive. Pain. Raw, quiet pain filled each sentence. When the couple who raised you came into my life, I saw kindness in them. I saw strength. I saw a future for you that I could not give. My hands shook as I held the letter. I chose to let you go so you could live. I chose silence so you would never feel divided between two homes. Silence. The same silence I felt that morning at the kitchen table. But for her, it had been a sacrifice. If someday you learn the truth, please do not hate me. I was young. I was alone. And I wanted you to live. I wiped my eyes again. Tears blurred the final lines, but I read them slowly, carefully. I do not know what kind of man you will become, but I pray that you are kind. I pray that you are loved, and I pray that you forgive me for loving you in the only way I could. There was no signature, just a small, faint fingerprint at the bottom corner. I stared at the letter for a long time. My heart felt full and empty at the same time. She wasn't a monster. She wasn't careless. She wasn't cruel. She was a mother who made an impossible choice. A choice that saved me. A choice that broke her. A choice my adoptive parents carried with silence. I folded the letter gently and pressed it to my chest. I forgive you, I whispered. Even though she wasn't there to hear it, even though she might not even be alive anymore. I forgave her not because the pain disappeared, not because everything suddenly made sense, but because forgiveness felt like the only thing she deserved. I placed the letter on the table and rested my head in my hands. My shoulders shook quietly, not with anger or rage, but with the kind of sorrow that comes when you finally understand the truth. Sometime around dawn, I heard footsteps. My daughter-in-law stood in the kitchen doorway. Her face was soft with concern. "Did you read it?" I nodded. My voice was too weak to speak at first. She walked over and sat beside me, placing her hand gently over mine. She didn't ask what the letter said. She didn't push. She simply stayed. And in that stillness, I felt a small measure of comfort. After a while, I whispered, "She loved me." My daughter-in-law nodded softly. "I'm sure she did." I looked up at her, my vision still blurred, and she let me go. She squeezed my hand. And your parents loved you enough to raise you like their own. Those words settled over me slowly. Yes, that was true. They had chosen me. They had given me a home. They had stayed through every stage of my life. I don't know why they hid it from me, I murmured. Maybe they were afraid, she said gently. Maybe they were trying to protect you. I nodded slowly. Maybe they were. But their silence created a shadow that lasted decades. Still, I couldn't hate them. I wouldn't. The truth was devastating, but the love was real. Both things could exist at the same time. I took a deep breath. What do we do now? My daughter-in-law asked quietly. I looked at the folded letter, the documents, the unanswered questions. I think, I whispered, there is more I need to know. She nodded, patient and understanding. We'll help you find it. And that was how this search began. Not with anger, not with fear, but with a quiet determination to understand the life that had been given to me. Twice. The next morning, I woke earlier than usual. I hadn't slept much, maybe an hour or two, but I didn't feel tired. I felt unsettled, as if something inside me had been shaken loose, and now I needed to understand where it fit. When I stepped into the kitchen, my son was already there. He had made tea the way I liked it, with just a little milk and no sugar. He placed the cup gently in front of my seat. "Morning, Dad," he said softly. I nodded. "Morning." He sat down opposite me, waiting. He didn't rush me. He didn't push for conversation. He just sat with me in that comfortable silence we had shared many times in the past. But today, the silence had a different weight. After a few minutes, I said, "I think I'm ready to talk." He looked up immediately, eyes concerned but open. "I want to know everything you found," I said. He took a slow breath, as if relieved that I had taken the first step. "We only found what was in the folder. The documents, you already saw. But, Dad, there was something else." I raised my eyes. "Something else?" He stood up and went to the bookshelf in the corner, pulling down a small wooden box I didn't recognize. This was hidden behind the trunk. We didn't open it. We thought it should be your decision. He placed the box in front of me. It was old, with a faded, carved design on the lid. The wood was scratched, but the box itself felt heavy, almost too heavy for its size. My heart thudded softly. "What do you think is inside?" I asked. "We don't know, but it feels important." I stared at the box for a long moment. Part of me didn't want to open it. Part of me feared what else had been hidden from me, but another part, the part that longed for understanding, pulled me forward. I lifted the lid slowly. Inside, I found a small baby bracelet with a tiny metal charm, a faded photograph of a young woman holding a baby wrapped in a blanket, a thin silver necklace with a pendant shaped like a teardrop, a folded piece of paper, brittle from age. The air left my lungs. The bracelet. The picture. The necklace. These were pieces of a life I never knew. Pieces of me before I became the son of the parents who raised me. My son leaned in gently. "Is that her?" I lifted the photograph. The young woman looked tired, but there was warmth in her eyes as she held the baby close. She looked like someone who had endured too much too young. I couldn't tell if the baby was me. The picture was old, faded, but something about the way she held the child, gentle, protective, made my heart ache. "I think it might be," I whispered. My son placed a hand on my shoulder. "Take your time." I placed the photograph carefully back in the box and picked up the folded paper. It was thin and fragile, like it might crumble in my hands. I opened it gently. It wasn't a letter. It was a hospital discharge form. The name on it matched the name of the woman who had signed the letter. My biological mother. She had given birth alone. She had been discharged 2 days later. No family listed, no emergency contact. Just her name and the word widowed. I stared at it for a long time. The silence around me grew deeper. My son whispered, "She really had no one." I nodded slowly. "She must have been so young. And so scared," he added. I closed the paper gently and placed it back inside the box. For a moment, I felt an overwhelming urge to go back in time, just to hold her hand, to tell her she wasn't alone, to tell her that life wouldn't always be so heavy. But time doesn't work like that. All I had were the pieces she left behind. I picked up the necklace next. The pendant was smooth, shaped like a single teardrop. It felt warm in my palm, as if it had been carried close to the skin once. I turned it over, and on the back, I found tiny engraved letters. "For my little one." My breath caught. I closed my fist gently around the necklace. After a long moment, I whispered, "She kept this for me." My son nodded. "Maybe she hoped to see you again someday." That thought stung and softened something inside me. I placed the necklace gently on the table. There was one more thing at the bottom of the box. A small envelope, sealed. My hands shook slightly as I picked it up. On the front, in the same careful handwriting from the previous letter, it said, "For when he is grown." My heart thudded painfully. Another letter. A second message from the woman who brought me into this world. My son's voice was barely above a whisper. "Do you want to open it now?" I hesitated. I wasn't sure I was ready, but I also wasn't sure I could bear not knowing. "I will open it," I said quietly. I broke the seal gently. Inside was another handwritten letter, shorter than the first. I began to read. "My child, if you are reading this, it means you lived. It means you grew into a man. And it means the world was kinder to you than it was to me." My eyes burned. If I am not in your life, it is not because I did not want to be. It is because life gave me a burden too heavy to carry with you in my arms. I swallowed hard. "Your father was a good man. He would have loved you so much, but his passing left me with nothing. No home, no family, no safety." I wiped my eyes again. "The family who took you, I chose them because I believed they would love you more than I could in my brokenness." A quiet sob escaped me. "Do not be angry with them. They saved you. They saved me, too. They gave me the strength to let you go." My hands trembled. "If you ever search for me, I want you to know this one truth. You were never abandoned. You were loved in silence." There was no signature, just the same faint fingerprint in the corner, as if she had pressed it there intentionally. I folded the letter carefully, my heart aching with both sorrow and gratitude. My son leaned closer. "You okay?" I nodded slowly. "I don't know if I'm okay, but I understand her." He gave a sad smile. "She sounds like a good person who lived a very hard life." "Yes," I said quietly. "And she loved me, even when she couldn't keep me." I placed the letter back in the box with the rest of the items. For a long moment, I just sat there, staring at the open wooden box, this little container holding an entire world I never knew existed. A world of tears, love, sacrifice, loneliness, and quiet courage. My son finally broke the silence. "Dad, there's more we can do. If you want, we can look for records. Maybe she had relatives. Maybe there's a way to trace something." I shook my head slowly. "Not yet," I whispered. "Let me feel this first. Let it settle." "Of course," he said, "whenever you're ready." We sat there together for a long time. No words, just presence. The kind of presence that fills the space between grief and understanding. Later that day, my daughter-in-law came home from the market. She noticed the box on the table and looked at me with soft, questioning eyes. "Did you open it?" she asked. I nodded. "How do you feel?" I thought for a moment, searching for the right words. Like I found something I didn't know I lost. She nodded gently. "Do you want to talk about it?" "Not yet," I said quietly, "but thank you." She didn't push. She just walked over and placed her hand on my shoulder for a moment. And somehow, that small gesture helped more than words. The family meeting. That evening, we all sat together in the living room. My son and his wife insisted gently that we talk, not in a pressured way, but in a way that let the heaviness breathe. My son sat across from me, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. "Dad, we want you to know that no matter what we find or don't find, your place in this family doesn't change." My daughter-in-law nodded. "You're the heart of this home. Nothing will ever replace you." Their words warmed something inside me, but also made a quiet sadness rise. "I know you mean that," I said softly, "but this is something I need to understand for myself." My son nodded. "Of course." I spent my whole life believing one story, and now I'm learning there was another story underneath it, a story that was kept from me. I paused. "And I need to understand why." My daughter-in-law spoke gently. "Maybe your parents wanted to protect you."
"That's what I'm trying to understand," I said. "Whether they were protecting me or protecting themselves." My son frowned. "Protect themselves?" I nodded slowly. Maybe they were afraid I would want to go back to my biological family. Or maybe they didn't want me to feel different. Or maybe the world at that time made them hide things that today we would say openly. I took a slow breath. I want to forgive them. I already do. But I also want to know the truth. My son leaned forward. "Whatever you choose, we'll do it with you." I gave him a small smile. "Thank you, son." The memory box. After the discussion, I went back to the box on the table. I touched each item gently. The bracelet, the photos, the necklace, the letters. Each one felt like a heartbeat from a life I never lived. But each one also felt like a bridge, connecting who I was, who I am, and who I came from. For the first time since the documents were revealed, I did not feel lost. I felt curious. I felt alive. I felt ready. Ready to uncover the story behind the silence. Ready to walk through the shadow and into the truth. But even as I felt that resolve grow inside me, I knew the journey wasn't going to be easy. Because the closer you get to truth, the more it changes you. If you liked my story, you can support me by making a donation so I can write more stories. Thank you in advance. And you? What would you do in this person's place? I would love to hear your opinion, so please share it with me in the comments. I'm always curious about what you all think. And also write me where you heard this story. For more life stories like this, like the video and subscribe to my channel. There are many other stories waiting for you. With heartfelt greetings. Until next time.